Hello students, tonight I'm going to be discussing Charles Lindblom's article, The Science of Muddling Through. So imagine, for example, that you are a policy advisor with the White House or with the governor's office, and the president or possibly the governor comes to you and says, hey, look, I need you to write up a public policy, a recommendation for climate change or healthcare or whatever you would like to choose as an example. And where do you begin? As a public policy advisor, what would be the way to figure this out? Well, of course, one way is to start from scratch. You define your goals, you rank your values, you survey your every possible option, and you choose the one that best achieves your objectives. That sounds rational, sounds scientific. So Charles Lindblom argues that this idea of going through those values, objectives, goals, it sounds great on paper, and it's very appealing. But for the most part, it's actually like a fantasy. It's not really something that is real, actually. What administrators, public policy advisors, political scientists, uh, criminal justice administrators, any type of advisor in that sense, or an administrator, what they're really doing is actually something much more modest and more messier. That's what his idea is, and his examples are in the article. He talks about this. So Lindblom, you should know the context in which he was writing was in 1959 when the article got published, was during the height of the Cold War, and we had just come out of World War II. There was a lot of ideas about using operations research, systems analysis, statistical decision theory. These were products of World War II that people were hoping to put into peacetime usage for public administration, public policy, and to make the United States and probably other countries a better place to live against the totalitarian regimes of the Soviet Union and other totalitarian regimes and other authoritarian regimes like most of Eastern Europe at that time. So Lindblom has two approaches in which he talks about the article. One approach is the root method, and the other one is the branch method. Now, in the root method, it's what's called a rational comprehensive method. It works like this. You start up from the ground up every time. You clarify your values, your objectives, you rank them. Then you conduct a systematic and comprehensive survey of all the potential policy alternatives. You rank them whichever option maximizes your values. This is how public policy should actually work according to the textbooks. The branch method is successive limited comparisons. Successive limited comparisons. What that does is it works differently. You start from the current situation. You make small incremental adjustments. You don't try to rank all your values abstractly. You compare specific policies against each other. You rely on your past experiences rather than comprehensive theory. And you expect to repeat the process endlessly because that's what the branch method works that way. When you make small incremental changes, you'll be working at it forever, basically. It's not going to be large changes. Now, the root method fails. Now, why does the root method fail? Is because there's three reasons why. First of all, the values cannot be ranked in the abstract. People disagree about values. People disagree about values. Even a single administrator, any public policy administrator that you come across or it could be one of you watching this video, you resolve to follow your own values, they run into trouble because the values conflict with each other in ways that only become clear in specific situations. How much efficiency are you willing to sacrifice for equity? It depends. Second, means and the ends can't be cleanly separated. The root method assumes you first pick your ends, and then you find the best means to achieve them. But in practice, the means and the ends are chosen simultaneously. One policy might give you more price stability, but higher unemployment. Another gives you less stability, but more employment. You're not choosing means to a pre-selected end. You're choosing among bundles of values and trade-off at once. Third, the comprehensiveness is humanly not possible. It's basically impossible, actually. Lindblom gives the example of an agricultural policy administrator who can't possibly trace all of the downstream effects of a soil bank program. In the article, he discusses how there's effects on urbanization, there's family structure, there's social security, there's foreign markets, there's US-Soviet economic rivalry. All of this stuff and much more. the chain of consequences for that public administrator to make those decisions is infinite. No one can do all of that. It can't be done. The competent cannot be done. So it's not a high standard. Actually, it's not a doable standard. Now, the branch method is defensible. The branch method he thinks can work. Now, incremental changes are predictable. They are, because you make small changes. Very similar to how some of you may be going through college right now, or you may be going through a master's program. You start at the foundation level courses and you build your way up. You're making small incremental baby steps towards your ultimate goal and objective, which is to graduate with a master's degree, a PhD, an undergraduate degree, whatever it is actually. But those small incremental changes, when you go through all those many days, through all the different courses in your degree plan, you finally end up finishing it. You get done actually. So errors are correctable. That is one thing. You take a small step that goes wrong, maybe you take the wrong class, you can always go backwards. You can fix it. But if you do a massive leap, you can't fix it that easily. It's too late by that point. Now, of course, incremental changes are also predictable. When you stay close to an existing policy, you can draw on accumulated experience because you already know that policy. You know roughly what will happen because similar steps have been taken before. There is also mutual adjustment. Mutual adjustment compensates for individual narrowness. Each agency ignores many values. But in a pluralistic system, a society, different agencies champion different values. They serve as watchdogs for each other. No single actor has to be comprehensive rational because the system as a whole produces something like comprehensive coverage through competition and adjustment. Agreement on policy can substitute for agreement on values. When people can't agree on abstract objectives, they can sometimes agree on specific policies because policies appeal to different people for different reasons. The example that Lindblom gives is Social Security extensions, which liberals like very much because it helps the welfare state, and conservatives surprisingly also like discussing welfare and welfare policies because then the unions will not demand pensions because you have Social Security. That should be your pension basically. And in a way, sort of it is, right? A government pension for everybody is sort of Social Security. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but there is sort of a guaranteed income in a way coming to you, right? If you're not going to get a pension. Now, neither group, neither Republicans nor Democrats, liberals or conservatives, can actually agree on to why that policy is good, but the agreement on policy itself is actually the test of the good policy. So they agree on it, and they think it's a good enough policy, having Social Security entitlement. So it's okay. We disagree on what the reason is, but we both agree it's a good policy. Let's go ahead and do it. Now, it's worth understanding and thinking about this that Lindblom himself mentioned that the method has serious faults. It has no built-in safeguard. It may systematically neglect the interests of the politically weak. So if you're a lower income person, you're politically weak. You don't have that kind of, power. You're not like a extremely wealthy person who can just, decide to run an election somehow, right? You just don't have that. And you may also not have someone to stand up for you. It can create the path dependency, locking us into incremental adjustments around a status quo that may itself be unjust, but people go along with it. There are policies sometimes that unfortunately happen like that. This type of incrementalism, unfortunately, what critics argue is it rationalizes conservatism. It has a built-in bias towards the existing distribution of power, which means that it can't change. It's already built in. It's frozen in time now, basically. There's also a question of whether incrementalism is appropriate in crisis situations, for example, when the status quo is fundamentally broken. So, for example, civil rights, climate change, I mentioned healthcare, but these actually are so complicated, sometimes they're considered like what's called wicked problems. And wicked problems are those that are so complicated and so complex, they don't have a readily identifiable type of solution. They're just so complex. They're just hard. So those ones you may need a root level, not a branch method actually, because they cannot work incremental wise. Now, last thing I should talk about this is that Lindblom's lasting contribution is the insight that the gap between how we think decisions should be made and how they actually are made is not just a fault of discipline or intelligence. It has to reflect genuine features of complex social problems, value disagreements, cognitive limits, and the irreducible entanglement of means and ends. Muddling through, therefore, is not something to apologize for. But it's also not something that you should be complacent about as a public administrator or public policy person, a theorist, right? The goal is to practice it consciously and skillfully, knowing both its strengths and its blind spots. I hope you got some good understanding and feedback and more better understanding through this lecture on Lindblom. And I hope that you some were able to enjoy it. And I look forward to seeing you in my next class.